All right, Bobby. So I'm going to review your hand histories that I got from you. And I used to do this quite a bit for some of the real top players. And I'm going to do it for you. So what I'm going to be using is Holdem Resources calculator. And it's something that really, in my opinion, revolutionized the way you analyze hands, because there are different tools out there where you can run your push-fold stuff and see what your range should be versus what it was. But what Holdem Resources Calculator allows you to do is actually quantify the level of your errors. In other words, to me, it's not enough to say, well, you should have shoved Queen 10, but you folded Queen 10, but you folded Queen 9. You know what I mean? I want to know exactly what level of error there is, because certain errors are just kind of as close to break even, so it's really not that big a deal. So what Holdem Resource Calculator does allows you to actually quantify your errors, and I've come up with a way to do that. Before we go through some of your hands, I wanted to explain what this type of analysis takes into account and what it doesn't. Right? So what this is all this is doing is comparing GTO to what you did. In other words, how much of a mistake did you make relative to GTO? Meaning, if you're behaving perfectly and your opponent is behaving perfectly, what level of error did you make? Okay. So what this does not take into account is, well, number one, it doesn't take into account, stuff. And when I say stuff, I mean, okay, I know this is a call usually, but I have such an edge over this field that I just don't think I want to risk it. All right. What I will say is this: is that when you make an error by like 0.1, and we'll get to what that means soon, because of hashtag stuff, that's fine. But if you make an egregious error because of stuff, it's not fine. Second thing that this does not take into account is your particular assessment of your opponent. In other words, this is presuming that everybody is shoving what they should and calling what they should relative to game theory optimal play. But if you, for whatever reason, have some kind of read on your opponent, you might elect to substitute that for what GTO is. Such as, well, I know I should only be shoving King 7 offsuit here or higher, but this guy is just so tight based on my experience with him that his GTO range is going to be just much tighter than that, so I'm going to shove wider. So this is what I will say to that. If you are going to attempt to deviate from GTO, and believe me, I've done this so long, if you are going to play exploitatively, as it is said, yes, if you are correct in your assessment of your opponent and how he will deviate from GTO, then you definitely gain by doing that. However, if you are wrong, then you certainly lose by doing that. And what I found is that the amount that you gain from making a read of a player to deviate from GTO is not enough to make up for what you lose when you are wrong. All right. It is almost always going to be better to just stick to GTO, unless you are just to say damn sure. Unless it's a really extreme situation. The other thing I will mention is that this particular analysis does not take into account bubbles, because this is just going to be like mid-game type play. You could change your calculations to put in a prize pool with a bubble, but this does not. That's what this does not include. And what I'm going to do after running this, which I've done already, but then I'm going to show you the game theory optimal chart, which will help you kind of improve it on this. But what you'll see when you go through this is not only does it tell you what your errors are, but it will tell you also, you'll see kind of a pattern in it. Like, I'll give you an example. So what this does under Holdem Resource, it allows you to import from your hand history file. So what you do is, I did this is like all your hand histories. You would just do one tournament at a time if you want. But like, for example, when you get them in here, you hit right click and quick analyze, right? And it'll give you a little criterion. So what I'm doing is I'm making the maximum effective hand that I want to look at is 20 big blinds or less. And what I'm doing is I want to only care about mistakes that are 0.1. I only want you to show those. And equity difference mistake, we're going to call it a 0.2. So you get a warning if it's 0.1, and it's mistake, which is 0.2, which makes sense. So anything above 0 is technically a mistake. Anything between 0 and 0.1 is just kind of whatever. Between 0.1 and 0.2, but 0.2 and higher, those are the ones that you have to look at, okay? Another way of analyzing is that if... One sec. Sorry. So if your mistake turns out to be 0.5 or higher, that's a pretty bad mistake, and 1.0 and higher is really bad. So let's run it just for this first tournament. I don't even remember what this was. This was at April 15th, so it was very recent. And you run this, and it runs it for you. So then what you can do is you can sort by differences. And what I'll do is let's go back to the top of all these hands that we looked at. And you'll see this is the first one. So a couple of tournaments down, you see this. And your big error here is a 0.4 error, which is pretty decent. And what this is a fold of ace-5 with a 13 big blind effective stack. And what you could do is if you want to analyze, you can look at the hand over here on the bottom right, and you'll see that you shoved for 13 big blinds, and you folded ace-5 suited. And that was a pretty healthy mistake of 0.4. So again, we could talk about, maybe it was a particular situation where you opted to do that, but you'll see where I'm headed here. Then we go on to this next hand history where your biggest mistake was, again, a pretty bad one, which is 0.8. And you'll see also, and we talked about, and I told you this was going to happen, was that this once again was a case with you in the big blind, and the geologist here shoving 12 big blinds effective, and you folding ace-8 suited. Okay. As a matter of fact, you'll see, if you want to look at what you could have called with, you could have called basically with any ace-x suited, down to almost any ace entirely, and still be within the realm of GTO. Okay. Now you'll do see, by the way, this isn't bad. I mean, some of these are really not terrible. So let's play around a little bit. Let's just keep scrolling down. Oh, here's another one. So this is only 0.28, but again, just as an example, here's yet another one where you were in the small blind, and this one is a little bizarre. Well, not bizarre. This one you'll see that this was folded to you in the small blind, and you just open folded 13 bigs with king 3 offsuit. Okay, which was 0.28 mistake is not the end of the world, but it's certainly a quantifiable, middling type of mistake, right? Here's another one. Jack 10 suited, you folded from this big blind for 8.3 big blinds effective, okay? To an 8 big blind shove. This IRS guy went for 8 big blinds, and you folded, and that was a mistake, right? And so you could do this all day. I mean, I did download all your hands. Here's a fold again, and I'm not going to go through all 180 tournaments, but like look at this one. This one is just brutal, right? From a mathematical perspective, this is totally brutal. To the point where I might actually think that you were sitting out. Yeah, you had to have been, because this one, 8 big blinds, in the big blind with king 10 suited. That's a ridiculously trivial call. Here's another one, ace-6 offsuit. Again, a fold from the big blind. Okay, so you see kind of a theme here, and you could do this. Trust me, we can do this all day. Oh, here's a mistake. You shoved under the gun with jack 7 offsuit. So I could have told you that was going to be a mistake. Here's another one from the small blind. It folded to you in the small blind, and 7.5 big blind. You're supposed to shove there. Okay, and it'll show you up here on the top right what you were supposed to shove. So when you go through this, you'll see that kind of pattern. Another big blind, all these in the big blind. These are pretty decent sized mistakes here. So how can you improve on that? Well, what I did back when I was really interested in this from sit and goes, I created, well, not even just from sit and goes, this website which I eventually put on PokerXFactor, which I showed you about before, where created all these different tools. One of them was, I'll get to some of them another time, but one of them was just this game theory optimal push fold tables, where it took every combination of GTO push fold equities and developed this app that allows you to put in various stack sizes and positions, and it'll spit out what your range should be. And just, I'm sure you know this, but what M is M is the ratio of the effective stack size to what's in the pot pre-flop, combining blinds and antes. And so this is all calculated in terms of M, and these are different positions that the hero could be in. So like, for example, if you have an M of 3 and you're in the small blind, you could shove, you'll see like almost any two cards here. You'd have to have 9-4 suited and lower, 9-4 offsuit and lower, etc. M of 5 on the button, you could shove this, and you'll see, obviously, as you have to shove more and more and more, you have to be tighter and tighter, and as you get further and further from the button, you have to be tighter and tighter. Now, again, you'll notice also that this chart and this analysis all presume that there was no other options other than pushing or folding, right? If you have 20 big blinds, nobody says you have to push or fold. You could do other things. And you could solve for that also with Holdem Resources calculator, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're presuming that it's all in or fold. Now also, on the right side is your call matrix, where let's say that you're faced with a shove and you're in the big blind. For example, you put hero in here, and let's say the small blind shoves with an M of 3, it tells you what your GTO calling range should be. Okay. Now, again, because quite frankly, I've done tens of thousands of these, and I could probably recite to you what all these things are without even looking. But even still, from time to time, I'll put this page up on my other monitor just while I'm playing, just so that I have a reference point that if I ever get into a tough situation, I could just look at it. Now, again, when I'm playing more frequently, I'll be in a little better shape, and I have it all memorized. I'd just be sharper, so I'm a little out of shape as far as that goes. But I would have my horses all have this up. Honestly, until they, I wouldn't make them, but they all did. Honestly, I would have people that would know what GTO is. And now, that's not saying, again, that you have to shove GTO. In other words, if you have one of these reads where, okay, you think the guy's going to be really tight, then you could shove wider. And if you think that some guy's really tight and he's shoving into you, you can call tighter. But it's always good to know what you're getting into. In other words, let's say that somebody, it's an M of 5, you're in the big blind, and the villain is in the cutoff, and he goes ahead and shoves, and you're sitting here with ace-7 offsuit. You can at least pull up and you say, okay, you know what, I really shouldn't be calling with ace-7 offsuit. I should wait till ace-8 offsuit. But it's only one hand. It's only one level of risk away. So if I really feel as though he's going to be tighter by a decent margin, then at least if I know what I'm doing, in other words, I know that I'm deviating from GTO, but it's not that big of a deal. So I think that between using this chart and, also for studying, and every once in a while throwing a bunch of hands into these analyzers, I think that's going to help you. The other thing you can do if you really want a shortcut, if you really want to do any of that, if you don't want to put the chart up or do work, I could tell you that for sure that you can just make a common sense adjustment that if you're ever thinking of that it's close, it's probably a call. And if you're ever thinking it's close, it's probably a shove, especially if you're in the blinds. So that's a good little shortcut, but you're better than that. You could probably get this stuff memorized pretty quickly. Here's that ace-8 suited one again, huh? Yeah. So anyway, I will also say that overall, I went through this. The level of the error rate here is very, very small, like relative to like a lot of players. So I don't want you to think as though, oh my God, you're bad or anything like that. This really is. What is this though? Folded tens? Nah, you definitely just you had to have been sitting out here. Folded to you when you folded tens? Yeah, that's not happening. This one though, you had 9-10 suited, somebody shoved 6 big blinds and you folded. It's a huge error. at least, you know, from a GTO mathematical perspective. All right, that's it. Hope this helped, and I'll continue to do these for other people if they want. I will talk to you later.